morning. This is the Guiding Light Small Business Podcast. We have Grace with us. She is an attorney. You are based in Houston, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And what type of practice do you have there, Grace?
I have a business and estate planning practice. So we focus
Okay.
on small businesses and families that want to protect their family and what they do for a living.
Got it. Got it. Okay. All right. Well, today what we're going to be talking about is contracts, of course, and kind of the legal side of small business. Some of the things that small business owners need to have in place in order to be able to function properly, keep them out of trouble, so to speak, protect themselves. How long have you been working with small businesses?
I started in 2004, so it's been a while.
It's been a little while. Okay. So I bet you've seen some things. That is for sure. Well, let's start it off here. I had a friend on LinkedIn and he sent me a message and he said, I'm going to have to start up another LinkedIn page because the company that I was working with owns mine. So I've got to start a brand new one. So I'll send you a link and then you can follow me there. Do you see that that's pretty common that businesses want to claim ownership to like a LinkedIn profile?
Well, it depends on the company. There are heavy regulated industries where we're talking about insurance, law firms, financial companies. They like to be a very hands-on approach because it is their reputation on the line and they want to be able to monitor it so that there is a compliance with what they need to be in compliance with regarding to the law. So if you get started with a company account, you will lose it if you switch just companies.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Well, when I asked him later, I basically said, why? Why is it that the company can claim your LinkedIn profile? And it wasn't necessarily about regulations as to what was posted or anything like that. It was about the network that he had built through his LinkedIn connections. The company claimed ownership to his network.
It depends what his job description is. So if his job description was to be a marketer for a company, and his contract said that, the client list that he builds is theirs, well, then per agreement, whatever he built up would be theirs. So you really have to see what was in his contract to see what was really going on. A lot of different things could have gone on.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So what would be I know the advantage, of course, to a company, but on the company side, if you've got a sales rep or somebody like that that's working for you and they're pretty active on social media, they've got a good following, how would you see a business could put that into place to where they could monitor that? They can, it's actually something that they can follow up with that, because a lot of your contracts that are out there, they don't have any weight. You know what I mean? They really can't be enforced. So how can companies make it to where that would be enforceable?
Well, you put it, first of all, in an employee contract. And then you have, employment manuals, you have other policies in business where if people want to keep their employment or start their employment, they need to give these accounts free. They need to share their passwords and let this account manager from the company in on it. But this needs to be set up from the beginning. If you have quote unquote rogue accounts, it's harder to monitor it. So you need to have a company that's actually motivated and focused on enforcement, because without enforcement you have nothing. And then if the contract says, your employee contract that we're talking about, if you do something like X, Y, and Z that the company doesn't want, we can take it off or do something with your account. But it depends on the dynamics between employee and employer.
Got it. Got it. Okay. What about if, and I know this is going to change depending, but what if somebody goes to work for a company and let's say they've got, 10,000 followers on LinkedIn when they go to work for the company?
I would say start.
That was something they had before they started working for the company. So and that's kind of where that gray hazy line is. How would the company handle that, and then how should the employee handle that?
Well, it really depends on what the bargaining is. If they get hired to get access to their list, it's one thing. If they get access to that person for different reasons and not wanting their list, that's a different story. Because, if you get paid to hand your list off to a company, well, then you got something in return for it. So it's a position that you bargain for at the time of the agreement.
Got it. Okay. All right. So what are the basic contracts that you would suggest, maybe even a business that's just starting up, or maybe a business that wants to make sure that they have the right things in place? What would be some contracts that you would recommend them get started with, or to have access to?
The first contract I would tell everybody to get yourself incorporated. It's your contract with the state that you are not a sole proprietorship, that you have some protections legally. The other thing that you need to do when you make that decision, and this is where a lot of people fail, they file with the Secretary of State to their paperwork, but they don't get their formation documents in order. They don't keep up with their minutes. They don't have an employee handbook. If they're in business with someone else and they have a partner, they don't have buy-sell agreements set up. It's all little things that you need to think of as the foundation for your firm that you're building your house on. And if you don't do it, well, it will collapse because the foundation is not there. Right. By making sure that you have this, you can protect yourself. So, and a big problem is when people start commingling. And what I mean with this is you pay business expenses from your personal account, your business account pays personal expenses. So technically, when you look at it, yes, you might have an incorporation, but you are the same as your private entity. So if you get sued, which quite happens a lot lately, depending on what you do, people can grab the money from your personal account, they can grab the money from your business account. So making sure you have a legal foundation that is solid will actually protect your business. And this is just the legal part for the business entity. The other thing that you is employee contracts. People need to know the difference between employee and contractor. So there are a lot of ways that people think they have a contractor and they get the 1099. But if this person really is an employee in the light of IRS, then you have other repercussions. You might need to pay unemployment. You might become liable for employment taxes. The real difference between the contractor and the employee is how much control do you have on how they do their business, on what they do their business, when they do the business. It's more than just a name that you tag on something. Contractors mostly are, well, if you have a term employee and you have different ways to classify them, there are different rules on how you can fire someone or hire someone. Mm-hmm. This all has repercussions on the long term on the financials of your business. So these things is really what you need to have. And the other thing that a lot of people forget about is brand recognition. So the main thing of your business probably brand recognitions, like Coca-Cola, like Exxon, like Adidas, for example. Their name is the value of the company. So if you want to build a brand, make sure you have your trademarks or your copyrights. Because if you have it, someone else can claim it and, build upon the foundations that you laid. So there are different aspects, depending on what kind of business you have, that you need to look at to make sure that you have the value and the basics protected within your, ecosystem.
Got it. Okay. All right. So as far as you mentioned an employee handbook, mm-hmm. I know I've seen some that are 5 pages and some that are 300 pages. With a business just starting out, what would you recommend that, and this is kind of a loaded question, of course, but what are the big gotchas that you've seen in employee handbooks where maybe something wasn't part of the employee handbook?
Well, you want to have the business model. You want to have the corporate in there. You want to make sure that people represent you in the way that you want to be represented. Sometimes skip over as something that's not really relevant, but it is relevant because business represents itself to the outside world. The other thing that you want to see is when can people take vacations? When can people get fired? Can they go on pregnancy leave? What do you do with sexual harassment in the workplace? It's a big topic right now, but having a handbook and not following up on this with yearly making people aware of what is in the handbook will open you to liability, because just having a piece of paper somewhere on a shelf does not mean that you have any reliance on it if you are not properly enforcing it. So there are different things. There's, physicians have different rules that they need to have in there than a store owner, because the contact with the person that comes to them is different. So it really is based on what type of business you have and what is the message abroad. This brings social media in there, because people on social media think, oh, well, this is me in my private time. Well, it's not really your private time if you talk about business. If you talk about the business finances, the business, oh, there's going to be a big promotion that is coming up. I want to let you know about it before it gets there. Well, you cannot do this. These are things that are business and they should be kept private. So there is a really fine line, and putting social media guidelines in your handbook will not only protect the business, but it will also protect the employee from, not making mistakes.
Right. We had a client that ran into a big problem with one of their employees. And what they were doing is the post itself was not about the business. It was about something else. But earlier, like a couple days prior, they shared one of the posts from the business's Facebook page and said, hey, come and see me to get a really good deal on blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, a couple days later, they posted something that the business was just like, oh my gosh. And just because of the fact that the employee said that they worked for the company and they made that other post, they tried to use that to fire the employee, and they couldn't because they didn't have an employee handbook. I mean, it was really bad.
No, but it's also bad for the company, because if you are a person who posts these things online and you think, oh, it's just me, you can have an effect on the business of them being able to be sued by someone just because there's an affiliation, or maybe a message that the company condones what you're doing online when they might not even be aware of it. So it's a spider.
Got it. Not sure if I lost you, Grace. Are you still there?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Okay, got it. Yes, I sure can. Okay, so in our business, the concept of copyright and trademark comes up quite a bit. If a company wants to copyright and trademark their name, what would you recommend a business actually getting started with?
Well, if you want to trademark or copyright, you need to go to USPT. They are United States Trademark and Patent Office. Mm-hmm. And the thing you want to start with trademarks is to see if there's someone already using what you want to use as a trademark. And just do a short trademark search on their website. And if it's something that's not too remotely or too closely similar to it, then you can file an application. In general, the application is quite easy. But if there's something that is similar to it, or they don't agree with you, the office actions get a little bit more complicated. And I would recommend an attorney that is actually familiar with these things than trying to do it yourself.
Got it. Where this actually came up with a recent client. He is a plumber based here locally, but in the name of his company, and I'm running into the same situation too. There are multiple companies that call themselves Lighthouse, or multiple companies that call themselves by this plumber's company name. Okay. But they're not based in the state. So on the state side, he's fine as far as his business name. But if he goes to try to trademark the name, and let's say that the other companies that are similar to his or have the same name have not trademarked, can he trademark it and post claim to that name, even though there's other businesses that have the same name
Technically,
that aren't trademarked.
If they granted, he has the right to that trademark. But because people already were in the area before him, it's likely that they will keep the right to that trademark in that geographical area.
Got it. Okay. So he can trademark it as far as outside of those other businesses' location, correct?
But you won't know about this until they write you about, I've been here since XYZ.
Okay. Because I remember there was another client of ours that they had been using the name for years. And a company came up and trademarked the name, and then she had to change the name of her business because it was trademarked.
A big problem is the laws of copyright change all the time. So what was possible 10 years ago might not be possible anymore right now.
So the law is catching up with technology then?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, also,
getting closer.
It's also because the world is getting smaller, so the rules that were just only applicable in, say, America are now catching up to be the same all over the world. So it's a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
Take from is the sooner you get your rights on paper, the more enforcement you have behind it.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Now, on the side of copyright, a lot of times I get emails from clients saying, hey, here's a bunch of pictures I want you to put on my website. And the first question I ask is, where did you get them? And a lot of people think that they can just go on Google and do an image search and use any image that they find. And I tell them, no, that's copyrighted material. You're not allowed to use it. I even had a client that got a $1,500 invoice from a photographer for using one of their images on their website. So copyright isn't something that you play with for sure. What are some of the things that you've run into as far as copyright goes?
Well, the main misconception with copyrights is that people think you need to register for it. Well, US law says the moment that you make something, it's copyrighted. You do not specifically have to look for it. Also, when you, like the example with Google, if you go online and you look for a picture, it does not need to say that it is copyrighted. Just that it's there, it's copyrighted because somebody made it. The main thing about copyrights is it needs to be on a medium. So it needs to be a picture, it needs to be on paper, it needs to be tangible.
Right.
And then you can write it. Copyrights are not just always the exact same picture. So if I use somebody else's picture to make my picture with, for example, there was a lawsuit a while back where somebody had a two-dimensional picture, or actually it's a one-dimensional picture because it's on paper, and he made a clay replica of it. So it was no longer a picture, it became a little statue of clay. And the fact that he transferred it to a different dimension, it didn't make him not infract the copyright law of the picture because it was exactly the same. So there are difficulties that you see. You cannot just use other people's material or compose two pictures together and claim, oh, it's not mine. You still use the original material. So the original material was still with the rights of the other one. And part of the copyright is not just the image, it's also the right of reproduction, the right of altering it, minor changes on it does not, first of all, you don't have the right to make minor changes. The other thing is with copyrights, it's the same thing with, I think copyright is the best one. When you work with people and you hire them, if you have an employee, it is almost certain that you as the employer will be the copyright owner once it's created. But if you use a contractor, 1099, or you do work for hire, you need to make sure that you, in your contract says that you will be the owner of the copyrights created during the employment or the stint of the contract. If you don't do that, the person who created it is actually the owner and not you, although you thought that because he made it for you, you become the owner. You just had a license. So I had a friend who started her website, and I think she put $25,000 in creating this website and getting the text and everything. but she never made a contract that she was the owner of it. So what happened the moment that she no longer worked with him, he said, well, now you have to pay me a license fee. And she didn't want to do that. So he pulled everything offline and she was stuck with nothing.
That's awful.
So she had to start all the way over. So making sure that you have a contract that says who gets the rights is very important. So this is where it's important.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Well, another thing that you mentioned about the format that the copyright is in, that also applies to like website content that's on another website and articles that are written and all that kind of good stuff. And a lot of people think, oh, well, it was on that website, I'll just put it on my website. Well, other than SEO ramifications, it's also a breach of copyright for you to do that. Is that correct?
Yes. The thing that you need to keep in mind with copyright is just because you write an article, let's say you write an article about, I don't know, I have doggies on mind. So let's say you write an article about how you train your doggy. Somebody else can start writing about how they train their doggy. It's not like you copyrighted the topic. The idea is not copyrighted. But the execution. So I can use your language to say how I train my doggy. I cannot use the image that you put on your, on your website with your blog to put it on my newly written blog just because I like your image. There's some overlap that you need to be careful for.
Right.
I want to make sure that people understand that it's not the idea that you copyright, but that it's the work that comes from the idea that's copyrightable.
Got it. Okay. All right. What about non-disclosure agreements? There's some that are not enforceable. Would you agree?
Non-disclosure or non-compete, they're not the same.
Got it. Okay.
So non-disclosure usually
I'm thinking
is
non-compete. You're right. I was thinking about a non-compete contract, and sometimes those aren't enforceable.
No. So as a lawyer, we cannot have non-competes on other lawyers that work for us. It's just a limitation that we cannot have. There are other professions that have this too. The non-compete one, it's overbroad. Like say you can now, because I'm in Texas, let's say Texas. If the non-compete says you cannot work whatever you do in the whole of Texas, that's overbroad. You potentially could use a non-disclosure when it's very limited. Let's say, okay, I'm going to train you to do X. You cannot work in so many miles, or you cannot do that where I'm at for such a period of time, and in return for that, I'm hiring you. There needs to be a quid pro quo. But if it's too vague or too overbroad, you have problems with enforcing it.
Got it. Okay. All right. That definitely makes sense. So if you're going to do like a non-compete or something like that, you have to be very specific. And that's where you're going to be able to enforce those, correct?
Yes. And it should not be arbitrary. There really should be a business purpose for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All righty. Okay. Any funny stories that you would like to share with us about something that's happened, maybe with a client or something you've seen recently?
I'm hesitant in giving information out, but I think the main thing that I see is people that don't have their contracts lined up, and they think you can have oral agreements with somebody that works for you, and then they get upset when they try to enforce it because the person doesn't show up or the person does other things instead of work. You have to be strict. You have to put on paper what you expect. You have to put on paper what they can expect from you and what to do when things don't go right, because it's really hard to not end up in court when it's a he said, she said situation. And you don't do that.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, how can we get a hold of you, Grace? Let our audience know.
You can always email me. My email is grace@gpslawyer.com, or you can call me 832-408-0505, but I'm only allowed to practice in Texas. So I have to,
Okay. Well, we do have some people in Texas, so that may be able to help you as well. So I want to thank you so much for being a guest, and I hope you'll come back sometime soon, and we can expand on a few more of the legal side of small businesses. I am going to put a link to Grace's website as well as her phone number and contact information in the notes. So you guys will be able to get through and be able to ask her any questions that you guys may have. Again, Grace, thanks very much for coming.
Thank you, Rochelle, for having me.
Thanks. And everybody have a great day. We'll see you next week. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.